When I was dying, that question, that phrase, control the controllables, what can I control, became my North Star. That doctor looked me in the eye and said, well, don't get emotional. We've tried everything we could, and I'm the expert. If I thought anything else was going to work, I'd be the one to suggest it. And in that moment, I realized he'd given up on me. He'd already written the ending to my story. I just knew I had to cram joy and urgency into every moment of my life. I changed the name on the alarm clock to 4 words. You woke up today. If I got another 24 hours, I was going to make them count.
Welcome to The Edge of Possible, the podcast dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cameron Atlas, and together, let's unlock your edge. Imagine for a moment that you've been training for a single event your entire life. You prepared for it, you've accepted it, and you built your identity around it. But that event isn't a marathon or a championship. It's when your life will end. My guest today, Erin Mark, was born with cystic fibrosis, a life-threatening genetic condition. As a child, she was a Make-A-Wish kid who was told she wouldn't live past the age of 18. For years, Erin has lived on borrowed time. But when she hit her 30s and entered end-stage lung failure, she decided she wasn't done writing her story just yet. And thanks to modern medicine, Erin is still with us today. She is now a keynote speaker who teaches organizations how to thrive through uncertainty. But this isn't just theory for her. She literally had to learn how to live after spending a lifetime preparing to die. In this episode, we go deep into the difference between grit and true adaptability. We break down how to advocate for yourself when the experts have given up on you. And we talk about how to stop waiting for certainty and start focusing on what truly matters. This is a powerful conversation about defying the odds and rewriting your story. It's coming right up here on The Edge of Possible. Erin, at a very young age, you were told that you wouldn't live past 18. I can only imagine what that must have been like. As a kid, how did you go about processing that?
It was hard. It was hard to process and to really fully understand what that meant. I was 5 at the time when I realized that I had a life expectancy, and it was only because I overheard my dad on the phone one night quietly saying my life expectancy out loud.
Wow, you didn't even know otherwise, like it was only through overhearing.
It was only through overhearing. And then the very next day, Make-A-Wish came to our house. And I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time. Most people know now as adults, especially what Make-A-Wish is and what they do. But for me, I just knew I was sick enough to get a wish. And most kids back then wished to go to Disney World. That was sort of the default and had already been prearranged. But no one told me that. So unbeknownst to me, when one of the men for Make-A-Wish leaned down to ask, Erin, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be? Without hesitation, I yelled, Tahiti! The room went like silent. And after a couple of seconds, that same man nervously cleared his throat and was like, how about Disney World? And I had a follow-up question. Are there palm trees there? The entire room shouted, yes! So I gradually accepted the palm trees and a chance to meet Cinderella. And I remember thinking Tahiti would have to wait, but not too long, because I knew I was on limited time, even at 5, from that conversation I overheard the night before.
Did you go to Tahiti before 18?
No, I didn't. And I still have that gone, if you can believe it. It is on my bucket list. I'm going to make it there.
You haven't been yet? When are you gonna go?
I don't know. I think I should go for maybe my 50th birthday. Maybe I'll plan a big trip for that. It's weird that I haven't gone, especially because I've made it. I've made it through the initial, living past 18. But it was always something that I have thought about, that funny story, because it's just, first of all, outrageous for a 5-year-old to be asking to go to Tahiti. But I think
Moana wasn't a thing. Moana wasn't a thing back then either, was it? So isn't it Tahiti that they're going to? Isn't it somewhere around there?
Yes,
I think
yes.
it is.
Yeah, because I'd probably want to go see Moana and not Cinderella if Moana was a thing then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
we were
love it.
learning about palm trees that week in kindergarten, I think, which is why I
Gotcha.
had it in my head. I wanted to see a palm tree. I was born and raised in the Northeast. I lived in Massachusetts. I've never seen a palm tree in my life in that point.
So then what happened? What was going on for you that meant that it was 18 as the life expectancy, and how did that hit home for you back then?
I just knew I had to cram joy and urgency into every moment of my life. It's one of the most common questions we ask kids, right? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And most of us have an answer. We might want to be doctors, lawyers, firefighters. But for me, I was asking a very different question is what kind of life could I live up until 18? And that's hard for a kid to process. And what was interesting was throughout my early life, I wasn't sick per se with cystic fibrosis. I had to do hours of treatments a day, but it was all I ever knew. I had an hour or two in the morning and an hour or two at night with nebulizers. I used to have to wear a vest that like shook me like a maraca to clear out the junk that got stuck in my lungs. And
Wow.
it was just all I ever knew was that life. So for me, I just thought, I'm not sure how much time I have or when I am going to get sicker. I just knew I was going to make the most out of every single moment that I had.
How did that show up then with your life, and what were some of those things that you made the most of? And then let's move on from there.
Yeah, every birthday was a huge celebration because I reached it. I reached that big milestone. And I think I said yes to everything, no matter anything anybody would ask me, whether it was even to play sports. I was not good. I am not athletically inclined. But one of my friends was joining the softball team and she's like, "Oh, do you want to join?" Absolutely, I want to join. Just even like little micro things at that. What almost happened? I almost broke my nose the very first time I tried to play. But I was like, well, check that off my list. Not going to play softball. Let's move on. It was just like these immediate reactions that I would always answer with a yes to. Because what did I have to lose, right? I wanted to experience all that I could in a short amount of time. And when I got to 18, which I wasn't sure if I was going to get to, and I graduated high school, I made plans to go to college because why not? I never thought I would have that opportunity, not knowing what was waiting for me, of course, on the other side, because that's where we could talk about where I transitioned to really start getting sicker and sicker into my 20s.
Yeah, wait, let's go through that. What happened?
So I went to college and I had a great first year, but I also did what every college student does. I partied. I
Yeah.
stopped taking care of myself. Those treatments that I religiously did twice a day became once a day. And I remember I felt the effects pretty quick.
Really?
And I came home from college after the first semester and my lung function was down. I was more tired. My vitals weren't, you know, great. And my doctor had to have like a serious conversation with me and was like, what are you doing? But for me, it was this light bulb moment to say, okay, I need to take this seriously, right? I had to go back to that 5-year-old who was living with all that she could and did all that she could to live. And I think I lost a little sight of that. I almost got too comfortable because I was doing so well, even though I knew exactly what was at stake. So I reframed, I recalibrated. I ended up leaving college after my first year because I didn't think that I would be able to maintain the level of care in a dorm. For me at the time, it just wasn't the right thing to do. And so I went back to taking really good care of myself, doing exactly what needed to be done with hundreds of treatments that I would have to do, the nebulizers, the IV antibiotics, the oral antibiotics I would have to take. And from there, I had a little reprieve in my 20s because I got back on track.
I think it's really interesting because by the sounds of it, you experienced the impact of getting comfortable, which so many of us do in the world, right? There's a great quote of like, good is the enemy of great. and
Mhm.
that, you can coast along pretty well, whether it's with your health and well-being or with business or with a career or a relationship or whatever the thing is. And you don't necessarily see the repercussions of a lower standard until
Mhm.
maybe later on, until a marriage falls apart or until your health gets really, really bad or the business goes downhill. And it sounds like you learned a pretty valuable lesson around standards and from a pretty, I guess, a heartbreaking place that had to come from. But that was your reality at the time, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's not like I wasn't sick growing up. I was still in the hospital, but I always bounced back pretty
Yeah.
quick. And what I noticed was at that point, I wasn't bouncing back. And I was disappointed in myself as well because I knew what was at stake. And I knew I had to take care of myself if I wanted this precious thing called life. And by the way, I was outliving my life expectancy. I was already winning. You don't need a crisis to change everything, right? You just need to know how to live every moment and every day. And that's what I always prescribed to. But I think I lost that when I went away that year and was just like, screw it. Let me just have fun. In a way, too, I feel like maybe I thought I earned it. I earned a little break from a life of having to always be sick, if that makes sense. Like I earned in a way to kind of like let some things go. But the reality is, with a terrible disease like cystic fibrosis, it doesn't take breaks. You want to take breaks, but the disease is not going to take a break.
Yeah. You said about feeling disappointed in yourself when you weren't doing what you needed to do to stay healthy. How did your self-talk change in those moments?
Yeah. I think my self talk changed, but also being compassionate to myself as well. I think I was disappointed in myself and I knew that I had to get back on track, but I also needed to give myself grace.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we're going through things and we're so hard on ourselves, it's hard to give ourselves grace, but we're human at the end of the day. I may have this terminal illness that I'm living with, but I'm human like everybody else. And I had to remember that I had the capacity to come back from this if I worked hard. Not a guarantee, but the capacity to try to reset myself.
How long did it take to go from, okay, I'm disappointed in myself to giving myself grace? Like, what was the space in between?
Yeah.
Usually there's going to be some form of time, right? Was there time where the self-talk was, I guess, beating yourself up a little bit, or were you able to just switch that over straight away?
No, I would say probably about 6 months.
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
kind of felt sorry for myself, which I think we often do in those situations as well. But I think a lot of it was also, it could have been me in denial, right? As well. Because at first we always want to make excuses. Well, I deserved to be able to feel like everybody else, right? I deserved to be able to kind of let things go. And in reality, we have to also take responsibility for that and that's hard, by the way. That's hard to do. And I was doing it on such an incredible level with having this life expectancy and this disease. And the other thing which was interesting to me was that through that, my doctor was compassionate. He wasn't at that time. I was still actually going to a pediatrician, my pediatric CF doctor. I didn't move to the adult one yet. So he
It
saw
reminds
me
just quickly. That reminds me of the. Did you watch Friends growing up at all?
a
And
little bit.
there's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
there's
yeah.
there's an episode where Ross he goes to his pediatrician. He's like in his 30s, and he still goes and he gets a lollipop. Did you go and get a lollipop? Did you when you
Yes,
walked out?
you freaking bet I got that lollipop when I walked out.
You
Yes,
deserve
yeah.
that lollipop, right?
I deserved that lollipop. I'm like, oh, is this a margarita flavor lollipop? Now that I'm an adult.
Great. So did that support continue with the pediatrician then? How did that go?
Well, I actually had to, at 21, be forced into the adult clinic for cystic fibrosis. That was challenging because the doctor that was there, the first doctor I went to at that adult clinic was great. However, he left after a short amount of time. So I ended up seeing another doctor, and that ended up being something that would change my life forever, was that doctor and the how my life turned out. Not in that moment. It took, a few years to kind of fully have that change, but it changed the trajectory of my life, and actually while I'm here today.
Mm. How so?
So I had a great rebound, as I mentioned. And for probably about 5 or 6 years, I was doing really well. But at 33, that road ran out. I was drowning every day. It felt as though I was drowning every day. And I was trying so hard to do anything I could to find new treatments, to do different antibiotic combinations, because I was immune to so many medications at that point from the years of taking them. That doctor looked me in the eye and said, "Well, don't get emotional, but we've tried everything we could, and I'm the expert. If I thought anything else was going to work, I'd be the one to suggest it."
Mm.
Then he said, "You should feel lucky for all the extra years you had. You should feel good about that." And in that moment, I realized he'd given up on me, that
Mm.
he'd already written the ending to my story. And to hear that from somebody when you're just clinging to life is one of the most heartbreaking things you could possibly hear, when all you want is to try. It wasn't that I was rose colored glasses, that I thought that, well, I'm going to be able to do whatever I want and be able to live. It wasn't that. At that point, it was a completely different Erin. It wasn't Erin in her 20s. This was Erin in her 30s, trying to do everything I could to live.
Here, with that doctor in particular, ego and lack of empathy within there. The ego is coming in of I know best, and then the empathy of, well, at least you've gotten this out of it, and so then it's almost a dismissive piece then. So then, like, what happened from there then?
Yeah. So I remember that day of that conversation when he said those words to me. I walked out of that clinic like a ghost. I got in my car and it just broke down, not because I was weak, but as you said, because I was so dismissed.
Yeah.
And here's the truth: when the people we rely on stop listening, whether it's a doctor, a boss, someone we love, it doesn't just dismiss our ideas, it dismisses us.
Did you believe
And
it?
no, I didn't,
Very
because
good.
you know that scene in the movie when you're like yelling at the main character, like Rocky Balboa, "Get up, find another way." Except this time that voice was coming from inside my own head. And it was saying, "Fight for yourself." So I did. I got home. I called every cystic fibrosis clinic that I could drive to that would take my insurance. I became relentless. And a few weeks later, I walked in to Dr. Patricia Walker's office in Manhattan, and she read my chart, looked me in the eye, and said, "I can't promise anything, but we'll try everything we can, and I won't give up on you." And in that moment, for the first time, I had a doctor who believed that my voice mattered just as much as theirs. And that collaboration gave me something priceless, which was more time.
Did you feel seen in that moment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that
Yeah.
feel?
It felt as though my life was still valuable, because that doctor made me feel, that other doctor, that my life wasn't valuable anymore, that I was a throwaway. And I don't mean to sound emotional when I say that, but that's how I felt in that moment. And, you know, those doctors forget that you are the expert as a patient. You have to go home every day and live with that disease, that issue, whatever it is. You don't have to have cystic fibrosis to know what it's like to be dismissed by a medical provider, or from anybody, right? Whether it's an exam room or a boardroom, those feelings of dismissal are the same. But in healthcare, that kind of dismissal can be deadly.
Mm. Yeah. What happened then with Dr. Patricia Walker? Was it?
Yeah, Walker.
Yeah.
So she ended up trying a bunch of different antibiotic combinations, and some of them worked, some of them didn't. The problem is with the lungs, they don't regenerate as easy. And I was also losing a ton of weight because when you have cystic fibrosis, your body, it's like running a marathon, even at rest, because it's just working so hard to breathe. My lung function was plummeting. And it was basically like, how could we just give me some time to get to the next IV antibiotic round? And that's just to kind of keep all the infection at bay. But 2 years later, I entered end life stage disease and I was dying. There was really nothing else. We tried everything. And it was at the point where I was coughing up blood every day. I think I was around 80 pounds. To go from my bathroom to my bedroom, which is not that far, was like a marathon for me. And in a weird way, Cameron, I was at peace because I knew I did everything I could to live. I fought. I was holding grief in one hand and gratitude in the other. Grief because, well, of course, I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay here. But gratitude because it was a miracle. I got those extra years and I lived a good life because I always knew I had that expiration date over my head.
I think about my uncle, who, an incredible man, passed away a few years ago, and he was in a wheelchair. He was quadriplegic, paralyzed from the neck down, and he lived a pretty long, like he lived into his 70s, and had a 40-year marriage with my aunt, and which was just incredible to witness the love that they had for one another. And I still remember there was a moment that I was with him in the hospital, and this was maybe I think a year or two before he passed away, and it was just him and me in this room, and I was looking after him for a couple of hours because one of the carers wasn't able to make it to be there when there was a nurse transition happening and there wasn't anyone in the room, and so I went.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying he felt like he was the luckiest man, and
Yeah.
because he outlived all expectations as to what was possible, which was beautiful to witness. Somebody who had been through an incredible amount of adversity witness and experience their life as being lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think all of us get that, right? Because we live our lives not realizing how fragile life can be. I think we see that right on the outside. And we see that from people that are close to us in grief who pass away, moments like that with your uncle. But when it's you experiencing it, it's such a gift in a weird way. It's like I'm the luckiest unlucky person because I know what it means to really live. And this is not a dress rehearsal. We get
Yeah.
one trip around the sun, right? And why aren't we? It's like that, quote, why aren't we running wildly towards every single thing that we want to achieve and we want to accomplish?
Yeah. I think about I think it's called the overview effect, when somebody goes up into space and they witness the fragility of Earth's atmosphere. And it's just
Yeah.
this ball that's just floating through this darkness of nothingness and this
Right.
tiny layer of what's keeping it alive, and just how fragile it is and how important it is to make sure that we're able to protect the only thing that we've got that we know right now, at least, to be able to live.
Right. Yeah.
What does end of life mean? How long did they give you then? You're coughing up blood. This is happening. You're 80 pounds. And it takes so much just to go to the bathroom. Talk me through what that looks like. Was it a matter of days? Was it weeks? Was it something else? What was going on there?
It was open ended
Really?
because
Yeah.
it's hard to know, especially a lot of cystic fibrosis patients actually will start the process for a lung transplant. So that's their second chance is getting a lung transplant, hopefully. And you're trading, of course, a new set of problems when you get a lung transplant, right? But it extends your life, which is the most important. But for me, we weren't sure because of my issue. So when you cough up blood, medically, it's called hemoptysis. So with that, we weren't really having those types of conversations yet because we didn't know if I would be eligible for a transplant. There's a bunch of other different things and factors that go into that. So end of life when you have cystic fibrosis is when, especially the hemoptysis, it could be one hemorrhage in your lungs when you're
Wow.
coughing that up and not being able to take certain medications because I was immune to them and because my lungs were so fragile. And of course, I was losing weight. We were talking about putting in a feeding tube so I could try to maintain some weight. I also have something called cystic fibrosis related diabetes. So that's something because my pancreas, so cystic fibrosis affects both your lungs and your pancreas. And your pancreas can't absorb fat. So I take hundreds of, different pills a day, pills every time I eat. But what happens is over time, your pancreas gets so scarred that it just stops working even for insulin production. So that's a whole other thing that you're fighting against too. It's just like you have cystic fibrosis, but there's so many other outside factors that is affecting your body that leads it into this chaos, especially at the end when your lung function is dropping, you can't maintain weight, you're obviously having other complications in your lungs from everything that's going on.
Are you still in end of life now then?
No. So what happened was at the very last moment, there was a drug that got approved called Trikafta, and it saved my life. And
Mm.
what happened was I'll never forget it. So it got approved and it was a race to try to get it to my doorstep. Well, what happens with all insurance and everything else, those things take time. They don't care that you are clinging to life, right? So I remember my doctor being at the office down in New York City. I live about 3 hours from New York City. And my social worker was on the phone with my insurance trying to get like a prior authorization to send to the mail order pharmacy and saying, we have to get this. If she doesn't get this, we're not sure how much time she has left. And, I knew that. So that night, actually, I was speaking at my hospital's fundraiser gala to talk about the importance of research and the hospital itself and the care team with, whatever little lung capacity that I had. But I wanted to because I wanted to be the voice of people who weren't able to do that and to speak to everybody who didn't get to that moment where this life-saving drug was approved who've passed away. And it was funny. I remember leaving to go back to the hotel. And are you familiar with Peloton?
Yes.
The bike. Okay.
Yep.
So Peloton actually was part of my treatment as exercise. When I would be doing nebulizers, I'd also be hooked up to my Peloton. There were some days I couldn't even pedal for more than 5 minutes, but it was something that kept me focused and my lungs as strong as they could be. And there was a Peloton class and it was like a couple of blocks, a live one. And I said to my doctor, all right, so I'm going to go to the Peloton class and everybody, listen, when you're end of life or you might die, you have a bucket list. I was going. I was like, who knows? I got to go there just in case this drug doesn't get approved. My husband thought I was nuts. It was his birthday. He was like, you're crazy. But we go and, I do a little pedal. But before that, I'm waiting for the class to go in and my phone rings and it's the mail order pharmacy. And they say, we just got a prescription for Trikafta. It's been approved by your doctor. I'm trying to set up delivery. And they got that approved from the time I left my doctor's office to the time I got over to the studio. And I say to the woman, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Can you hurry up? I'm trying to get into a Peloton class. Can we set this up? The look on my husband's face. It turns out she also was a huge Peloton fan.
Yes.
And she says to me, absolutely. She goes, this was supposed to be delivered next week. It was supposed to be the following Saturday. She goes, listen, I'm going to figure out the system. I'm going to have this on your doorstep tomorrow. I got to help another Peloton fanatic out.
I love it. I love it. I was going to say,
the next morning I got home and it was on my doorstep.
It was on your doorstep the follling day. I love it. It would have been pretty funny if you got it delivered to the Peloton studio, right?
I feel like they would have to put me in a commercial or something if that was the case.
Definitely. I think even just this story alone, I think there's some validity to this being as a potential commercial at some stage. So so good, so good. So not being end of life now, like what happened with that drug? How has it saved your life? And what has that led to? Like how long ago was that?
So that was in 2019.
Okay.
That drug was approved in October of 2019. And I got home the next day, took that first dose, and nothing miraculously happened right then and there. But over the next week, I started to, it's what cystic fibrosis people refer to as the purge. A lot of junk in my lungs was coming up. I was starting to feel a little better, a little more energy, nothing crazy at that point, but I knew something was happening. The following Saturday, I woke up. I'll never forget, it was a sunny, cold November morning. I opened my eyes, and for the first time, I could take my very first deep breath of my entire life. I can't explain it in any other way that it was the very first deep breath that I felt. And I wasn't drowning anymore. And of course, I wake my husband up and I make him watch me breathe. Can you just watch it? Am I doing it right? And he's
So
and
good.
so he's like watching me. He's like, "Yeah, I think so, babe." Like, so I said, "I think we should celebrate. We should go get pancakes." And he was like, "Okay, no problem. Let me know when you're done with your treatment." Because before I did anything my entire life, I would have to do enough, especially the last 5 years of living before this drug got approved. I would have to do an hour at least of those treatments. I would have to do some sort of walk or Peloton ride, even for the amount of time that I could be able to do that. And I said, no, I think I can go before I do that. And as something as so little as going to eat breakfast before doing a treatment meant everything. We went and got breakfast. And I will tell you, as cheesy as it sounds, I'll never forget the pancakes in front of me, the coffee, and this like warm sun coming in the booth and thinking, I might actually get to live and extend my life and not struggle anymore. It was huge, but I wasn't expecting what happened next.
What did happen next? And has it, when it comes to that extended life, is that an indefinite thing? Like, where is that at now?
So let's talk about the extended life first. So nothing's a guarantee. The drugs, it's a 6-year-old drug now. Who knows what happens over time? I never ended up getting a huge bump in my lung function. Some other people with cystic fibrosis did. I still only have about 45% lung capacity, but that's up from, the year before when I was very sick. I was probably in the 30s. So I had a little bump, but I basically have half the lung function of most. And that's just because the lungs don't regenerate. They're an organ that does not regenerate. So I have years of infections, bronchiectasis that are never coming back. And my goal now is to try to keep my lungs as healthy as possible. I still do have to do those treatments that I mentioned, but not as religiously every day. It's more now when I'm sick. And I think almost I have learned how to thrive with 45% lung function. We talk about we don't know what capacity we have for things, but we underestimate our capacity. Because me with 45% lung function, I've done more than most people with 100% lung function in my life. And so it's just we have to see how it goes. But I'm living for every moment, and nobody has put some, I think right now, and I don't quote me on this, maybe the life expectancy for someone with CF who is born today, it might be 50s, 60s. But listen, this disease is different for everybody, and there's ailments that are different for everybody. And as I get older, there might be more issues because people with CF have never lived longer. So we don't know what that's going to look like. But I can't focus on that, right? I'm going to go back to focusing on the moments that I always knew how to focus on, even when I was dying.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the lessons learned, because have been so many in there that as I've been listening and you've been sharing your story, so many great lessons that have set you up to be able to be resilient and be adaptable and thrive in uncertainty. And I'm sure these lessons are really universal when it comes to within business, within work, within our own lives. So what are some of those lessons?
Yeah. Well, one of them is how to be adaptable. But I will say, when I started to live that normal, quote unquote, life, I was actually really thrown off at first. All of a sudden, I had this whole long road ahead of me that I never expected. I was preparing to wrap things up. And suddenly I needed a 401k, a LinkedIn strategy, SPF in my moisturizer. And I'm just, you people have been living like this your whole life? This is very stressful. And at first I was thrown off. I was just like, oh my gosh, what do I do now that I have? Like, what career am I going to have? Right? Like, what do I want? Where do I want to see myself in 10, 20 years? And I got overwhelmed. And I realized I had to go back to exactly what you just mentioned, those lessons I learned when I was dying. And it was to thrive in uncertainty like I always have. So I needed to not worry about the next 10, 20 years. I just needed to worry about the next 10 minutes. What matters in the next 10 minutes? What matters in the next 10 months? And then what will matter in the next 10 years? It's breaking your life up in those smaller segments. And I also think it's about adjusting your goals. We make these specific goals. And what we don't realize is we box ourselves into these goals because in the next year, we have to accomplish ABC. But we need to make broader goals. Like I needed to make broader goals for myself. Because if something didn't work out, just as the same way as an antibiotic didn't work out or treatment didn't work out, I had to adapt. I had to adjust. It's almost like, when we use our navigation, Waze, whatever we use, that we're just going to the grocery store. We know how to get to the grocery store, but we turn on that navigation because we just want to find the easiest route. But what happens if there's an accident or something's blocked? It doesn't panic. It just finds another way, right? And life works like that too. And that adaptability is how I got through so many hard moments when I couldn't control the situation, but I could control my reaction and I could control how I needed to adapt to get further and to stay on track without losing my mind, quite frankly.
Yeah. Do you think about the alternatives then when it comes to solving a specific challenge? Let's start there.
Yeah. So can you explain more with the alternatives,
Yeah.
what you mean?
So when it comes to alternatives, so you use the GPS as the example.
Yeah.
GPS is going into a specific direction. There's something that comes up. All of a sudden, I've got to go around. And so, do you think about ahead of time different alternative ways to be able to solve the challenges that you're coming up against? Is that developed in your thinking?
I think so. And I think it's just something where if A doesn't happen, then maybe I'll try B and C. And I guess to put it in a context where I wanted to really start keynote speaking as a career, right? Now, I didn't know who would actually want to listen to me, to be honest. And I was doing speaking for a long time, even before this new lease on life. But it was really about how to leave a legacy because I wanted to be able to leave a legacy. And legacy wasn't about your job, it wasn't about your title, it was about how you made people feel, right? And I was thinking to myself, well, who's going to want to listen to this in corporate or who's going to want to listen to this, and pay me to come in, right? And I thought to myself, well, you know what? If it doesn't work out, if I don't get hired or I don't get a TEDx or I don't, all these different things, there's other ways I can still impact people and still have them learn from me and my lessons, whether it's coaching or being able to just go in and speak with different groups and finding another way, right? Because I think we have to make those different plans, not to put us off track, but so we can keep moving forward and more confidently and that we don't have to be perfect. I always think of something that's like a baseball, right? Like if you are waiting to do a home run, to make a home run, you're never going to swing, right? You have to take that first swing. And we have to learn how to be bad at something and be okay with being bad at something because we're never going to get good. And that goes into making those plans for anything that we're working toward, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I think that adaptability piece is really important. Of like, if we can think through the different scenarios that could come up, and then you don't have to have it all planned out, but having some form of an understanding as to how you're going to move.
Yeah.
Should that other thing occur? Should you get blocked in some way, shape, or form? and almost preempting that, not saying it's going to happen or believing that you're not capable of doing something, but there's so many things that are outside of our control when it comes to achieving something. And it's never going to go in a straight line, ever. No matter how much we plan out and execute, unless we're in a science lab, it ain't going to happen. And so planning and thinking through those different scenarios to be able to then, if/when it does come up and it doesn't happen how we want it to, being able to move quickly is important. And I think that I was thinking about the situation that you mentioned. I think it was when the original doctor said there's nothing else that could be done. Basically, I know best. It sounds like you went basically straight home and you
Yeah,
were on the
I did.
phone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about here of like when it comes to, okay, what are the other options that I've got available to me? Because in your case, it was largely life and death. If you
Yeah.
waited a certain period of time, then that
Right.
could have, again, massive repercussions. And so, yeah, I think scenarios is a really cool lesson to, and thinking through those alternatives that's been learned out of here. Let's touch on the other lesson I want to, well, there's many lessons I think that we can go through here, which is fantastic. The next one that I want to touch on is Dr. Patricia Walker. The difference between her approach and the previous doctor's approach, and the importance of how we're showing up in our lives for ourselves and for other people to ensure that they feel, I guess, heard, understood, but also that we're able to move things forward if it's on a, say, a business, in a business context. How do we go about making sure that we ensure other people feel heard and understood?
I think it's leadership from the top down. The way that she ran or runs her clinic and her team. So empowering her people, because it wasn't just her I was dealing with. Like, she was where the buck stopped, but it was the respiratory therapist, the nurse, the social worker. She allowed them to hear patients and being able to make decisions when maybe they couldn't see the next best step, right? There was no hesitation. It was, what do we need to do for this patient? I hear what they're saying. How can I make the best decision urgently? And urgency is a skill and not a panic response. A lot of times in leadership, or in my situation, in a patient, urgency, yes, is having to get to this next appointment, this next drug, taking care of this patient in an urgent matter, right? But if you think about it like a fire alarm and fire drill, the fire alarm is like that loud, annoying, that's like the panic, right? But urgency, that's the fire drill. That's practiced. And what Dr. Patricia Walker did is she practiced what she knew was best for her patients to make the best judgment calls as needed while never taking hope away. Because that other doctor took hope away. She never took hope away. And hope can be taken away also at work, right? It doesn't have to be in a medical situation, because if you think about it, there's a new product launch, there's a reorg, right? Everybody is like, well, this is hopeless. This is going to be terrible. This product's going to fail, right? They have this mentality of setting everything up for failure because hope is taken away. But hope is one of the most important and not cheesy values, I think, that we can have in both leadership and life around teams.
When it comes to hope, if it was standalone, oh, I hope this works out, then that's a completely different to what we're talking about here, right?
Completely different.
That
completely.
hope is, there is a belief, a layer of conviction that even if it doesn't work out, we're going to give it everything that we have. But with that came, I'm sure when you were going through that, came a renewed sense of hope. A renewed sense of maybe this could result in something better than what I've experienced up until now. And if we take that into the workplace, if you've got a team and they believe that it's hopeless to implement something new in a world that is moving faster than ever, you are going to fall behind so incredibly quickly, because it doesn't matter how much you say. You can be calling it from the top, I know best, I know best, I know best. which would be the previous doctor example. And
Yeah.
if people are like laughing behind your back, going, no, he or she does not know best, right? We'll do what's required while that person is around. But as soon as that person's not around, then we're going to go back to the way that we believe is to be true. And so the ability to be able to instill hope comes largely, I would be really curious as to whether Dr. Patricia Walker and her clinic, whether they've really talked and spoken about values and what those values were, or if it was simply her values and the organization was small enough where she could instill them where they don't necessarily have to be written down. I mean, ideally they are, but if the company's small enough, then sometimes you can get away with that. Do you stay in touch with her? And could you ask her that question?
I'm going to ask her, yes.
Please do.
She always laughs that I talk so highly of her because for her, this is a standard of care. She thinks I'm
Yes.
nuts, but I'm like, you are the only reason while I am alive. I mean, we text. That's how
Yeah.
I'm very close to her. And she thinks I'm nuts, but this is a standard of care. And this is the only way she's ever ran her clinic. So much so that I think there was a time where the hospital system, because everything's about money in the hospital system, right? And I think she put patients over money because she wanted to make sure that her clinic was dotting, all the I's, crossing all the T's. And it was about what was best for their patients rather than maybe what was best for the overall hospital system. Now, not that it wasn't, but I'm just saying from my old clinic, which I won't name which one because I don't want to get sued, where it was not like that. It was all about money. And, once 5 o'clock came, the doctor wasn't calling you. It was an on-call person who knew nothing a lot of times about your case, right? Or was a fellow who wasn't sure. But when you have a disease like cystic fibrosis, it's not a 9 to 5 disease. I wish it was, but it's not, And I think what I saw in Dr. Patricia Walker's clinic, it went above and beyond. So if I called after 5 o'clock, most of the time she was on call or the call would be routed to her to be able to at least have some sort of insight of what was going on so she could direct me to after hours care.
Yeah. I'd be really curious when you please send me a note
I'm going, yeah.
about and I asking about values and also about like what her beliefs are, because it sounds, again, there's real clarity about, because this is where all behavior comes from. It comes from our values and our belief systems, and they shape what we think on a day-to-day basis. They shape the actions that we take, the behaviors that we execute on, and the more clear we are on what those values and beliefs are within an organization, but also within our own lives, the clearer we are on how we show up. And by the sounds of it, that in this example, which is just, again, a great example, there was consistency of that showing up, correct?
Yep. Correct. Yep.
That comes from a real clarity of knowing who we are and where it is that we're going and why it is that we're going there. And I think that clarity piece and that conviction about those key components, who we are, where we're going, why we're going there, very, very important. And it really builds, and I've thought a lot about this over the last year or so, about the importance of character, because it's in the building of character that, especially within a team environment, but also within a relationship, actually wherever there's other people involved, is that it enables the other people involved to have conviction about how you will show up in a specific scenario. And that no matter what scenario it is, that you are going to continue showing up in that way. And that builds trust. And trust is so incredibly important for achieving any kind of outcome when there are more than one person involved. Yes, one person involved within your own self, there's got to be trust there, but especially when there's multiple people involved.
Yes, 100%. And trust empowers people to have good character, to make those right decisions, and to also be able to allow them to try different things. I think with uncertainty, we want to do things always the same way. Like our first instinct when uncertainty happens is to freak out, right? And it almost is like paralyzing to us. And I think having that trust allows, especially teams, to say, okay, let's take a breath, take a pause. And we know our leadership trusts us and empowers us to make the right decision despite not knowing the outcome.
Mm. I think something that's really important there is instilling a culture of being okay with making mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you're empowered to make a decision without having all the answers or knowing the outcome, like it is a guarantee that there's going to be mistakes that are being made there. And I think so many
Yeah.
companies fall short with this because we crave innovation and the ability to be able to adapt and for the team to be able to navigate change. But if you're not willing to have people make mistakes, now it doesn't mean the same mistakes get made twice. That's a whole different ball game, right? Because that's where
Yes.
you got to be learning, growing, and evolving through. And it's where I love sharing with organizations, right? These key questions you can be asking on a regular basis of, okay, what's working, what's not, what are we going to do about it, and what support do we need? Because that enables you to then make those tweaks, make those changes when mistakes are made. But if you're not even allowing for mistakes to be made in the first place, innovation is not going to happen, period. You're not going to
No.
be able to adapt. You're not going to be able to thrive in uncertainty because you've got to be willing to make mistakes in order for something else to have clarity about what's working, what's not, and being able to actually then do something different next time, right?
100% agree. And don't you think it's like you get stuck in analysis paralysis if you're worried about those mistakes? So you can't learn how to drive in a parked car. You're going to make mistakes. Get in the car and learn how to drive. But you have to be empowered to be able to, hit a curb every now and then and make
Yeah,
the
yeah.
adjustment.
I think that's where having certain layer or certain level of the answers, which comes partly of, okay, we know where we want to go. We know, again, why we're going there. We've got our clarity of values. We've got our clarity from a belief standpoint or our principles. And then we've got certain criteria as to what would be a successful outcome without necessarily having to have then all the answers of that. But that's where I like to think of it as like strategically guiding our curiosity. And there's a strategy behind it because you're guiding it in a specific direction without it just being, oh yeah, let's just do something and see what happens, right? That's stupid.
Right.
And like
Yeah.
it's a recipe for just making some terrible decisions, like
It's
terrible
true.
decisions, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think finding that middle ground is important. I have a question with that. Has your saying yes to everything changed now that you have, I guess, a different outlook in a way?
Mhm. No,
It
I
hasn't?
don't think so. It hasn't.
Has that gotten you into trouble at all?
Not yet.
Hmm.
TBD. Well, I mean, let me say this. When I say yes to everything, meaning that I'm going to try anything once, right? Within reason. There are things that have happened that I've gotten to situations and I say, oh, shoot, I made a mistake. But I don't look at those as mistakes. Those are lessons. Failure is just feedback, right? We can use it to recalibrate, to get further to what we want. Those are lessons. That's the way I see situations that I say yes to. If I fail at them, if they're not the right fit, then you know what? At least I tried it because I think that regret is worse. And so for me, that's why I tend to say yes for everything. If somebody asks me to do something and I feel comfortable, I have to feel comfortable with it. Of course, there are certain limitations, but I think that I'm always, yes, absolutely, no problem. For me, actually, I'll tell you a story. I would be asked to be on podcasts and I would say, yes. For me, and this is something I go through probably with more like imposter syndrome, I am not the most eloquent speaker. I'm authentic for sure, but I think a lot of times, especially when I'm talking about that, it's hard for people to kind of find those universal experiences. And I would say, well, who wants to listen to me? But I continue to say yes, because if I can make a small impact, which is one person who maybe listens to this podcast or other podcasts that I've been on, then you know what? I've done my job.
Yeah. I mean, there's some great lessons that we've already gone through that I think is going to be really valuable for folks that are tuning into this. So what are you most excited about going into this next phase?
I'm most excited to be able to touch as many people as possible, touch as many organizations as possible about how they can adapt in these uncertain times that we are living in, because life is chaotic. I would say, I get up on stage and say, doesn't everybody love this change? Doesn't everybody love this constant uncertainty? It's like crickets, right? And it was just like, well, let me tell you how I've been thriving in uncertainty for most of my life. And I haven't done it perfectly, by the way. Not everything that I have done and lessons that I have taught have been perfect. I remember even just like that imposter syndrome that I just mentioned. On one of my very first keynotes, I was terrified. I just was like, oh my gosh, I have to get on stage. I had this like pounding headache. So right before I went on, I took a Tylenol. And when I put it back in my bag, I looked down and realized I didn't take regular Tylenol. It was Tylenol PM. And I was like, oh, so I was like, well, we got to roll with it. And again, roll with the changes. I have to be adaptable, practice what you preach. And I'm like getting mic'd up. And I remember Googling, how long does Tylenol PM take to work? Well, if you're wondering, the internet claims 30 minutes. And my keynote was for 45, as most are. And I just thought, well, here we go. And I remember my brain panicking. Nothing happened yet, right? But I was thinking, I'm going to slur on stage. People are going to think I'm drunk. Like, what's going to happen? And I got through it. And I had to go back to one singular question that I've asked myself my entire life, starting at the age of 5 when I found out I had this fatal illness. What can I control right now? Because we have to continue to ask ourselves, what can we control? That's been my North Star, asking myself that question. So when I'm going into those situations and doing what I'm doing now, to say yes, what can I control in that moment? And to be excited, to be able to share my message and to help people. I want to be of service to people in these bonus years that I get to have. And I feel like it's my mission. My life was saved for a reason. I don't know why I'm still here, but I have many friends with cystic fibrosis who passed away before I did. And it's my duty to be able to be a message and a messenger for them who didn't get that opportunity that I get now.
Well, there's such a great lesson in focusing on what you can control, because so much time gets wasted otherwise. So much time gets wasted on things that we simply don't have control over. And our ability to be able to focus in on the things that we do have control over, and then seeing how we can maneuver those, and then the things that are outside of our control, how can we adapt? Because there are going to be those different things that come up, and your ability to be able to, shift and move around those as well and tweak along the way is important. Really good.
Yeah. And controlling is like the mindset. Adapting is the action. You need both. Yeah. I think they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. Share more about that.
Yeah. So I think when you're thinking of, I always say control the controllables, which is like one of my main core principles that I teach. And it's like, what things can we control? We control our actions, we can control effort, preparation, attention, right? But on the other side, make the list of things you can't control: outcomes, timing, other people, external circumstances. Okay, great. Now, how are we going to adapt? Adapting is the action, and adapting goes back to that navigation that we were talking about, to make sure that you're finding other ways, creating bigger goals that you can adapt to along the way. And I think there's something else really important in that, which is the next phase of that, is lean on others. We don't do this alone. Whether we're an organization or a family, or we have a spouse, right? We also need to ask for help in many uncertain situations that are out of our control. And I think having that support from the outside is the only way that we can really help move forward as well.
Do you find it easy to ask for help?
I actually don't. And I've had to be better at that over the years. When I was very sick, it was very hard to ask for help. I actually felt guilty about asking for help. There was like a guilt, because I just thought, like for my husband, for example, he never made me feel guilty, but I felt guilty because who would want to be married to such a sick spouse with such a scary disease? And I wouldn't even have to ask for help. He just did it. He would make supper every night because I had all of those treatments. Just little things, right? Carrying heavy bags, doing all the chores, the laundry around the house because I wasn't able to contribute. And that was hard for me because I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to show up for him. And there were a lot of times where I just couldn't. And not that I had to really ask for that help, but receiving it was hard. But then there was a second layer, which was friends who, were like my family, especially at the end, and they wanted to help. They wanted to do what they could, but I didn't want to ask for help. I was ashamed. And I'll never forget when I was very, very sick. I had a friend who was like, "Well, I'm coming over just to have a coffee." And I was like, I thought that I didn't want to entertain. Not that she expected me to entertain, right? But she showed up regardless. And she brought dinners for 5 nights for my husband and
Mm.
I, which was great because he could take a break because it wasn't just me, it was him as well who needed help. And he doesn't want to ask for help either, right? So now we're both not asking for help. And people on the outside are like, we are going to help you. We see what's going on. But I remember her being there and she just let me cry. And I did break down. And I was so thankful that she kind of pushed past that boundary. And the one thing that I think also, kind of getting off topic of the help, but what she didn't say was the words at least or but. Because I think
Yeah.
when you have such a serious disease and you're going through a terrible time and a very scary illness, everybody wants to kind of just say, but at least it's not this, or at least, but you know what? In that moment, though, even as resilient as I was, it was hard and I was scared and I needed to be able to have someone just let me feel all the emotions.
Yeah. Why do you think people use at least or but? Is it a self piece to make them feel easier about
Yeah,
the situation? Is it something else?
I think it's them. I think it's so
Yeah.
they can feel easier in that situation. But I think we do a disservice because somebody sees me, right? And they think, wow, she's so resilient. She was always happy when she was dying. There were many times that I was, because again, as we talked about, I was just happy to get all those extra bonus years, right? But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. And I think when people see these motivational speakers who have illnesses like I do, they want to know that if they get an illness or they get into a situation, that they're also going to be happy and they're also going to be thankful. That's not the case,
Mm.
right? They're going to go through hard times. My job is to share with them and teach them there's always another way, but we have to be realistic about it.
Mm. I think about, because it's been probably the last 6 or 12 months, probably 6 months or so, that I've really been conscious about the at least specifically, but I've been conscious of for a number of years, I feel, but the at
Yeah.
least part and
Yeah.
and just being conscious of that. And I think maybe I don't understand the moment.
Hmm.
And so it's me maybe avoiding the discomfort of not understanding something fully, or being and then being willing to sit with the understanding or not knowing and just allowing it to be there. But yeah, it's interesting because I've been more conscious about it and have noticed that come up a few times, that in my language, and aiming to remove that, because noticing that it's actually it's a self-preservation thing versus being a service.
100%. But do you feel like a little bit, it's like, because you have to almost deal with your own mortality if it was a situation like that, that you were talking to somebody or, dealing with somebody in this sort of situation like myself, but it could be a job loss, right? It could be something
Yeah.
else that, I don't know, that you want to, I don't want to say distance yourself from, right? But that, well, there's always a bright side, almost a tell. And I think there is. I believe in silver linings to the end. However, everything is, of course, right, not going to always be having a terminal illness, I believe, is a silver lining from my life. However, it wasn't like all day, every day. I thought there were silver linings to have a
Yeah.
terminal illness.
I don't know if it's thinking about my own mortality. It might just be me being a dude trying to fix stuff, right? And
Yes, yeah.
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like trying to get to the other side of discomfort or being uncomfortable is
Yeah.
probably a good way of putting it. Trying to, because of the uncomfortable feeling, is the desire for it to feel better. And in the process of thinking that it is going to be helpful to the situation, actually what was required in that moment was completely different. And I think about the movie Inside Out, the animated movie, and there's this moment with Joy and sadness, and Joy is just trying to say, well, yeah, let's go here with the imaginary friend. I can't remember what his name is, but I think it was like a pink elephant with a briefcase and top hat or something like that. And there's just this moment that he's sitting down next to, and the sadness comes and just puts her hand on his and just says, that must be tough. And it's just this moment that Joy is looking on and realizing that the answer isn't always joy. Sometimes the answer is just being there and allowing that moment to be and not judging it, and allowing it to be what it is in that moment, and being able to have and create and provide the space for that person to be able to feel it all, because that might be what they need in that moment, you know?
Yep, exactly. I love that. Yeah. I was just talking actually with somebody about that Inside Out movie. So I haven't seen it yet, but they were saying something to me about how fear, right? It grabs the control panel. They were mentioning fear from the inside and everything gets reactive. And I said something about that. Like, we want to be able to control all of these things. And we want these like guarantees, right? And there are no guarantees in life. And fear is kind of constantly grabbing that control panel. So we were referencing the Inside Out movie, which is funny that you mentioned that.
It's a great movie. I mean, the second one's great as well, and I'm sure I'm hoping there's a third one as well. Especially for kids, it helps them to understand just how, because it's fairly, from what I understand, it's very accurate in its description of the different pieces as well, and how they're animated and all of that, but it's actually very, very aligned with what actually happens in the brain. So yeah, very, very cool. So there's a framework that you talk about. I saw in your bio, the DASH framework. Let's talk about that, because that's what you're sharing about when it comes to thriving in uncertainty. Maybe we build some structure around this now for those folks listening in.
Yeah, sure. So that is, with uncertainty, we're always going to have to make changes, right? And we need to pause, then dash. So pausing comes from the power of the second thought. We get, I think it's something like 60,000 thoughts a day. And, most of them are negative that we're getting. And we have to kind of filter out those thoughts to make the changes. So dash actually came from when my life was saved and I was super stressed out about what I was going to do. And for me, it was just like my life was about survival. And now I had to make it, I went from training to die to essentially training to live. And so I remember I wrote down some goals on paper and I dated my paper. I forget what the date was now, but I put a dash next to it because I was going to set up these goals. And I just looked at that dash and I was just like, well, this is where the work is going to happen. And what's funny is DASH is a great acronym to talk about that work. So D is for decide what you want. Don't wait for a crisis to get clear. Ask yourself what will still matter at the end of my dash. A question that I heard once, which I thought was brilliant, is what would you regret or make you cry on your 85th birthday if you never tried? Think about that when you're making your dash to make these changes. And then the A is act before you feel ready, which you are never ready for any change. You are never ready to adapt, right? It's just human nature. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Urgency is not a skill, it's a panic response. So make those plans, but you're going to have to act on them one way or another. And that leads to S, which is stack the reps. So you're going to act on it and you're going to stack. Most reps will not be perfect, but hear me when I say rejection or failure, just data. Use it to recalibrate to get to what you want. And how you get what you want are habits. Habits build legacies. Big goals are great, but daily actions shape your dash. These Small ripples create big change. So when you're trying to go through and process changes in adaptability, I think that DASH framework is an easy one to go back to, and something we learn things, right? In 3 or 4 is easier. So it's a, 4 pieces that you can go back to when you're trying to make adjustments.
What have you noticed the impact that's had on folks that you've been sharing this with the talks that you've been delivering?
I think they have more courage, which
Mm.
is huge, to
Why is that?
make changes. I think it's because it gives them a way to be able to follow a change, a goal that they want, but also gives them some, I don't want to say gives them an out, but gives them a way that if it fails, or if it doesn't happen, that they can feel good about adjusting and adapting to that change. And I think a big piece of that as well is that we think it's too late, right? We think it's too late to make a change personally. We think it's too late to make a change professionally. A company thinks it's too late to make a change to a product. It's never too late. What's even good for us as people to make changes is good for companies, right? Deciding what you want your values to be, even within that, is really important. Not being afraid to fail is important, right? It doesn't have to be habits. These habits could be something where you're just pausing for that power of the second thought, something little. It doesn't have to be these big extreme things that we're doing.
Very good. I I often think about my grandpa in this case of just you're never too old to make change and you're never too old to reinvent yourself. And he started woodworking when he was 80. You
I
know,
love that.
started, just said, yep, just going to go and make tables and chairs and do all this kind of stuff. And did it
Yeah.
right up into his 90s. And you're never too old to reinvent yourself, to make change. And I think especially as we delve into this crazy amount of change that, by the way, is only just starting to ramp up. If you think it's rapid now, just wait another 3 to 5 years and another 10 years, it will be unrecognizable with just how much change is here and is coming. And so we do need to get really, really good at being able to adapt, to being able to thrive through the uncertainty. If this is going to be almost the baseline, is that things are constantly in motion, which has always been the case anyway. It's just that it's happening at a more rapid rate. Everything is always in motion,
Yes.
and it is always moving. And if we can become more and more comfortable with being uncomfortable, more and more able to adapt to the world around us through structure, but also through being able to move inside of that structure, I think is
Yes.
really
Yes.
important because there are bound to be, I don't think any of us, or not many of us, could have even dreamed up that this is where we would be with stuff that's happening from an AI standpoint. Even probably, yeah, even go 5 years ago, I'd say probably 95 to 99% of the population wouldn't have had any idea that this was going to be the case. And so,
100%.
and so that's the case. There's going to be, bound to be things that will come up over the next 3, 5, 10 years that barely any of us have even thought of yet. And so the ability to continue to train your ableness to adapt to the changing environment with things that are outside of your control
Yeah.
is vital. I think it's going to be one of the most valuable skills that we can be teaching as within workplaces and within life as well.
Yeah, and I think especially with AI and everything that's coming, and people are worried, right? AI is going to take their job and all of that. And don't get me wrong, I get that because that's a real thing. But how can you adapt to that? How can you say, all right, then what would I want to do instead?
Yeah.
And start now, right? Make that change, make that dash, make that plan. So if I AI did take your job, what else could you do? I'm not saying AI can't plunge a toilet, right? It's not going to take a plumber's job at this point, right? However, there are roles that is actually really affecting. So make sure that you are marketable. Make sure you're putting your best foot forward. And how that starts is embracing the change and being adaptable.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd say even from a plunging standpoint, you got humanoid robots that are. I just saw
This is
stuff
true.
with Boston Dynamics the other day, that their latest robot that came out, and I'm looking and going, damn, that is happening quick, right? That is
Yeah,
happening
right.
quick. And so the reality is, as has been the case for many, many decades, is there will be certain roles that will cease to exist, or certain parts of people's roles that will cease to exist, because technology is simply better at it, and it's better at doing those repeatable tasks, as an example. And there will also be roles that will come that we haven't even dreamed up yet.
Yeah,
And
right.
that's incredibly exciting to think about, that
Yeah.
most of the jobs that'll be here in 10, 20, 30 years haven't even been invented
Mhm,
yet. And so
mhm.
continue to stay on the cutting edge, I think is really, really important there. Hey, you delivered recently a TEDx talk?
Yes, I
What was
did.
that on?
So it was about how to advocate for yourself when it matters the most. So I did talk about that doctor story for the doctor who had given up on me. And I taught a framework easy for people to remember should they get in a similar situation. And it's called the SOS method. So I can walk you through it. So S means to say it out loud. Lead with the words, "This is not normal for me." It takes all emotion out and puts the facts up front. O is for open your notes. When you are sick, overwhelmed, your brain misses details, right? So please write it down or record it. If you are in a doctor's appointment, ask if it's okay to use an AI recording app so you can look back on the transcription later. And the last S is for support, a reminder to bring people with you for those appointments. And if you don't have anybody, most hospitals have a patient advocate, and people don't know that they can ask. And if all else fails, use the most powerful sentence in medicine: "I'd like a second opinion." Those 3 steps were my SOS, right? And I hope if just one person listens to that TEDx talk and is going through a situation similar to what I went through, that I could maybe make a mark on their life to be saved and forgetting them to advocate for themselves.
It's a really good framework. How could that, if we broaden that out a little bit, can that apply to people's lives and maybe within business as well?
I think so, because I think sometimes we're afraid to say it out loud. We're afraid to speak up in the meeting, right? Of
Yeah.
course, right? Like we're nervous about, we say something and then we're nervous what everybody's going to think, your boss is going to think. But that's how you advocate for not only yourself but your clients and your customers. They're the ones giving you that feedback, right, about your product, about your business. You need to make sure that you're advocating for them. Say it out loud in those meetings, in feedback calls. Oh, for open your notes. This is something that everybody should be doing. Use an AI recording app, right? We have things now to make life easier, right? So if you need resources to be able to advocate for yourself, your team, your client, make sure you're getting as much data and as much content as possible. S is for support. I think right now, especially, we are in a day and age where everybody is remote. We're not close to our colleagues as we used to be, right? And that's just the way it is. But I think also remembering to have allies at work is really important. You need support to lean on. And yes, your husband and wife can listen to you all day after, a happy hour or a dinner, but they don't know what's going on truly at your work, right? It's just a remembrance to find a ally at work so you're able to talk things through with them. And I don't mean like your deepest darkest secrets, right? I mean someone who can help you get through these hard moments, because just as hard moments in life are going to happen, hard moments in work are going to happen.
Mm. I think about a couple of things with that. The open your notes piece first up, and this goes back to, we were talking a little around the AI side of things, that when it comes to opening your notes, verify the notes, right? Because if they're coming from an AI language model, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. And there are countless examples. We actually use on the podcast, we use AI for a number of these pieces when it comes to research, when it comes to show notes, when it comes to working out what some of the opening hooks are going to be. And from there, when it comes to the opening for the episode, multiple occasions, one of the team member comes through and says, "Hey, here's a few of the different opening hooks as options. and select which ones from the episode that are best. And I've gone through on multiple occasions now and looked at the transcript that AI has put forward, and then said, I don't think I asked that question.
No way.
Yep. And it's made up. It's made up questions that do not exist. And this is with explicitly asking for only utilizing the transcript that is actual official. And so I think it's really important for us to be thinking about, as we move into this artificially intelligent world, that there are times where those notes, don't just take that as gospel.
Mm-hmm.
You should be looking at those notes and asking yourself for, like, is this actually the data? And this goes for your own notes that you're making, and then making sure that whatever notes that you're getting within different platforms, that you're verifying.
Yeah.
I had this conversation with someone just the other night. I was having dinner together with somebody, and we just spoke about the importance of verifying, which I think that's what this step is, a huge part of this. And I think the second one, as you were sharing, is around that support. I think as we go into this crazy, whatever this next phase is going to be for humanity,
Yeah.
allies within a work environment, yes, definitely. And continue finding ways to build connection, both in a professional sense and in a personal sense, because the more that we get away from this. I was listening to an interview on a different podcast the other day around companion artificial intelligence and stuff like that. And even within different language models as well, that it is built to give us what we want, to support us at every single step. And that's not human.
Right.
That's
We need
not a real
accountability.
relationship. And so that ability to be able to have real relationships, I think when it comes time to need that support from somebody, you've deposited in the goodwill bank over the course of many years. I guarantee that the people that were there for you in those moments of hardship, even though in those moments it felt a bit of shame, like feeling ashamed to receive that help, there over the course of time, you have been there for them as friends,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And don't wait until you need something from folks,
No.
because that's, again, it's not the recipe for really healthy relationships and being there to support those who need it, but also getting the support you need.
100%. And I think too, especially with work, there's like to find mentors, but also just find sponsors, right? Like mentors are great, right? Especially at work, because you can learn from them. You're able to see the path that they got. You can get their insight. I think that mentors are more likely to hold you accountable as well if you tell them what you're really looking to do. But I think sponsors are so important as well, because sponsors are the ones that are advocating for you in rooms that you're not in. And
What's a
both of
sponsor?
those, so I think a sponsor is more somebody who you deal with, probably more of a personal relationship as well, day in and day out. So they could be a closer teammate. They could be a direct manager to you, where a mentor, I feel like, is more like CEO level, or maybe not within your organization, but you see as upper echelon. About when we talk about big goals and you dream big, you want to be that person. That's your mentor. Where I think sponsor is somebody maybe only a couple steps ahead of you, that you can look to. You can offer advice to them as well, but they're going to offer more advice to you. But you have more of a personal and professional relationship with them. Those are how I distinct those two. And I think they're both really important in a professional world, to be able to find two people like that. But we have to do that through connection. We can't just do that, over the screen once or twice by talking to somebody. We need to create a relationship with them on some level.
Why is a sponsor important to you?
Because I think it's how you get into rooms and conversations that you might not have access to. And I think for sponsors, especially if they are a couple levels above you, I hate using the word above, but you know what I mean by that, as far as, folks who are maybe in also different parts of your organization that they can sign off on your feedback and what your wishes are, as far as say, hey, this is what her team is experiencing, right? Like we need to get her in front of this team so they can hear it. I'll use an example with like sales and product development. Product development or IT hates to see sales coming through. I've been in sales and partnerships for a long time, right? Because we want to influence the roadmap because we know that we want more sales. That's just the way it is, right? So we want all of these features built, and IT is like, we cannot do this. This is not on our roadmap for this year or next year, right? But you have a sponsor coming in kind of middle of that saying, hey, no, listen, Erin is wonderful with clients. They trust her, prospects trust her. We really need to take into account of the feedback she's giving so we can try to get these features built out this year or within the next 2 years.
I think that's really important I think of it as finding a champion inside the organization when it comes to building opportunities as well. So yes, it could be within the actual organization, but also thinking about when you're aiming to build an opportunity within an organization, especially if there's multiple decision makers involved, is having
Yeah.
that person that's on your side that believes the outcome that you're aiming to achieve together, that you are the solution or your product or your service is the solution and the best solution for that. Because then you're going in a bat for like with each other, right? And
Yeah.
for each other and with each other, versus it just feeling like you're going in blind. And so I think it's not only a valuable piece within an organization when you're inside a team, but also when it comes to moving things forward, whether they're with strategic partners or you're aiming to get a deal over the line. So I like that. Hey, we have a rapid fire segment on the show called Your Edge, where we walk
Okay.
through your values, beliefs, and habits. First question, what's your number one value and why?
Oh, okay. So I think my number one value is definitely courage. Courage is the one thing that's kept me alive. My whole life kept hope alive when things were really dark. And I've learned also that courage can show up in different ways throughout your life. There were moments when I was sick and tired and handling a lot. And as we talked about, there were people who were trying to say things like, at least, but you're so strong. And the courageous thing for me to do was not pretending that I was okay. It was being honest about how scared I was, but still having the courage to take the next step, even though I didn't know how things were going to work out.
Well, I think it
Does
was
that make sense?
courage in your vulnerability as well. So there was not
Yeah.
only courage coming out the other side of like going, still aiming to move forward, there's a
Hmm.
forward motion to it. I think it takes real courage and I heard from a mentor years ago that the ultimate form of courage is vulnerability. And it
Yeah.
comes in those moments of the courage to say, hey, things are not okay right now. That takes
Right.
courage. And
Yeah.
so that's such a great, great value. It's definitely one of my top ones as well. What about a core belief that's shaped who you become, whether it is a belief about yourself and your abilities or people in general, or maybe even the world?
Control the controllables. And we
Yeah.
hear it a lot in sports, right? It's a sports metaphor a lot of times, but it's really about life because so much of what happens is outside of our control. When I was dying, that question, that phrase, control the controllables, what can I control, became my North Star. Not how do I fix everything, just what can I control in this moment? And even so, what can I control then in the next 10 minutes?
There's a really good thing about that belief, and that this is how I teach it when I'm working with a private client, is that there's an action associated with it. An action associated beliefs means that there is something that you can actually do about it if you're not living in alignment with it at a certain time. Otherwise, they can just become these almost separate to us, affirmation type experiences that we go through, versus it being something that I can take full ownership of here. Because here's the thing, if you're not getting what you want, if you're not getting the results that you want, you're able to then take a good hard look at yourself, right? And go, all right, let's get real and let me look at where am I controlling the things that are outside of my control right now, and how can I bring them back into my control and be able to move forward from there. So really, really good belief. Final one, what's a habit, routine, or ritual that you simply can't live without, whether it is a daily habit that you execute on that allows you to be better, right out to, say, an annual tradition that you have with folks?
It's the way I start my mornings. On one of my sickest nights when I wasn't sure if I was going to make it to morning, I remember I changed the name on the label on my iPhone alarm clock to 4 words: "You woke up today."
Mm.
So it was a reminder, if I got another 24 hours, it was going to make them count. 6 years later, even after my life was saved, that's the first thing I see every single morning. And it sets me up for the day. And it also encourages me to look for signs, even small ones, on why this is going to be a great day. This could be the best day of my life. And I do it because I don't underestimate ordinary days anymore. October 21st, 2019 was a Monday. That was the day that the breakthrough drug got approved that saved my life. And it was on a Monday. Anything can happen on an ordinary day. And those two things are continuous reminders of that. And they set me up for success.
I mean, a great morning ritual is, it can set you up for the day. It can
Yeah.
set you up for the week ahead. It can set you up to make the most of the day that you have. I'm really glad that you're still here, and that drug found you, and you have such great value to offer, and there's such wisdom in the things that you've learned. And I wish you all the best with that. Where can people go to find out more about your work?
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to still be here with you. You can find me on my website is erinmark.com, on LinkedIn at Erin Mark, and Instagram is the Erin Mark. Not that I think I'm the, but Erin Mark was taken. So that's it.
The or I am are the two usual suspects, right? Of getting when the native handle isn't available. Hey, it's really been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening, we'll link to everything that was mentioned in the show notes at CameronAtlas.com/podcast. And we have some great new guests coming up. So make sure you hit that follow button, leave a comment. And until next time, go and write the next line in your story. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time here on The Edge of Possible.